Okay, hello, hello. Welcome back to another SEDA College Online Intermediate English lesson. My name is Austin, and I'm so happy to see you here today so that we can talk about another English idea. I want to say thank you all for those who keep coming back each day to watch my lessons. I really appreciate those who take time out of their day to watch, so I just want to say a special thank you. So get ready. We have a very, very good lesson plan today. We're going to go in a lot of detail today. It's going to be a lesson full of really grammar ideas and grammar concepts because I really want you to be able to finish this lesson and understand everything about this idea. So let's begin. The lesson that we're talking about today is going to include infinitives and gerunds. So I'm sure you have heard something about these ideas before, infinitives or gerunds. You might know a little bit about what one is or what the other is. Well, this is what I really want to focus on today. This is the major idea. I really want to go into detail for each of these. And I really want you to know at the end of this lesson what they are, how to use them, and why we use them. That way you can really take away all the information about these things. And then after infinitives and gerunds, we're also going to talk about some vocabulary about work, specifically vocabulary you see in job advertisements about describing a position and describing a job. So it's not a whole lot, but just a few words to help out if you're looking at any English job advertisement. All right. Well, before we begin with infinitives and gerunds, we need to talk about derivation. So this is a concept about changing a word from one type to another type. So it's, we don't need to look too much at this, but this is kind of the key idea for what an infinitive or a gerund is. You're taking one word and using it in another way. So just to help show what I mean by word type is I'm talking about things like nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, articles. These are kind of the traditional categories of word type. And so what derivation is when I take a noun and turn it into an adjective, or I take an adjective and make it a verb, or I make a verb into an adverb. You can take these different words and usually through a suffix or through some kind of change, you can use it in a new place in the sentence, in a new context. And that's what we're doing with infinitives or gerunds. So let's look at a word like danger. Well, I can take the noun and I can make the adjective dangerous. Or I can take the adjective quick and make the adverb quickly. Or I can take the adjective hungry and make the noun hunger. Or the verb accept, I can make the adjective acceptable. And this kind of change is really what an infinitive or a gerund is. You're taking a verb and now you are using it as a noun. So that's what an infinitive and a gerund is doing in a sentence. It's now this verb being used in a noun context, in a noun way. So that's why this idea of derivation is really important, because you always want to think about gerunds and infinitives as nouns, because that's really what they are doing in the sentence. They are behaving as a noun. All right. So let's look at infinitives more specifically. So an infinitive is the base form of a verb without any change. So there's no change for time, no present, no past, no future. And we're not really changing for person. So there's no I, he, she, or we, they. We don't change for any of that. And so the form is very simple. It's just to and the verb in that base form. And that's really all an infinitive is just to and the verb. And so, something like, I decided to bake a cake. Here we have infinitive, to bake. My house is difficult to find. Infinitive here, to find. And my sister works to make money. So here we have to make as the infinitive. And so that's all these are. These are verbs with their to preposition, so that they don't have time, they don't have person. But so how do I know when to use them? What is the right way? What is the right context? Well, here are some usage rules I can give using these infinitives in specific situations. So the first way that we use infinitives is as the object of the sentence. So you must remember that an English sentence has a subject, it has a verb, and it has an object. So something like I hit the ball. Well, infinitives can be the object. They can be the ball in that example. Also, infinitives are used after adjectives. So this is one of those always rules. After an adjective, you'll use an infinitive, always. Or to express a reason or a purpose. So another way we use infinitives always is if you say a sentence and you want to add a y, you want to add a y to that sentence, you can use an infinitive. And then finally, we use infinitives after certain verbs. Well, this is really number 1 and 4 together. So after a verb is usually the object, not always, but usually. And so certain verbs require object infinitives. Unfortunately, I cannot give you a rule or something to help because it's really just memorization. Some verbs like infinitives, and there's no rule for it, just custom or habit about that verb. So really all you can do is memorize. That's the only thing. So sorry, I cannot help more, but that is all I can say. Some verbs. So let's look at examples of these. Number 1, I tried to paint today. So here we have it as an object. I tried to paint. So I tried what? And so the infinitive is answering what. What did you try? I tried to paint. Or after an adjective. So it's something like, it can be hard to make bread at home. Well, here we have the adjective hard, and so the infinitive is adding that information. What is hard? To make bread at home. Or we can look at number 3. She studies architecture. Now we're looking at expressing a reason or a purpose. So architecture is a noun. She studies architecture. Why? To get a job. So you can see that all 3 of these examples, 1, 2, and 3, are always going to answer what or why. Those are what the infinitives are doing here because they are behaving like nouns. We're taking these verbs and using them as nouns to answer what or to answer why. And then finally, as I said, there are just certain verbs. So here is a short list. There are many more verbs than what I show here. But these are just some common ones I chose to show the idea. So, for example, you always agree to do something. You decide to do something. Expect something to happen or to do. You expect to do something. You help someone. You help someone to do something. You hope to do. You learn to do. So you'll always use infinitives with these verbs. And like I said, there are many, many more. You just have to begin to learn the common ones and just make the memorization that this word is infinitive, this verb is infinitive, this verb is infinitive. But that's generally it. These are infinitives, and these are the 4 rules I can give you about using them. But, of course, there are some exceptions. Always exceptions. So sometimes we use the infinitive without to. This is called a bare infinitive, B-A-R-E, bare infinitive. And there are a few times where this is very common. So we'll use the bare infinitive after modal verbs. You know this already. We have talked about modal verbs a lot in this intermediate series, and you know that always after a modal verb, you have the verb in the base form or a bare infinitive. And then after special verbs, we also do this. So after verb make, we'll use a bare infinitive. And this is not make as create. This is make as to make something happen. You know, when somebody causes an action. That's the idea. After the verb to let, we'll use a bare infinitive. Let here is a synonym for allow. And then after verbs of sense, like hear or see or watch, we'll use the bare infinitive. So what does this look like? Well, for example, she can sing very well. Here we have modal verb, can, and then after the bare infinitive, sing. And it'll always be modal verb, bare infinitive. And it does not matter the modal verb, can, she can sing, she must sing, she should sing, she will sing, she could sing. All of the modal verbs will have the bare infinitive after. We've seen that over and over. But how about something like make? Janet always makes everyone laugh. So here we have the idea that Janet causes this. And so when we do this, the format is always make, and then the person or the people, you always make somebody, and then the verb. And this verb is that bare infinitive. She always makes everyone what? Laugh. Next, we can look at let. My parents didn't let me stay out late as a teenager. Yeah, my parents didn't let me stay out late as a teenager. So here we have verb let and then stay as a bare infinitive. And then how about an example with a verb of sense? I watched him walk across the street. So here we have watched, and then after it we have walk, just bare infinitive. So one kind of pattern you can see here is that in 2, 3, and 4, it's always this structure of verb, person, verb. So verb makes everyone person, verb laugh. Verb let, person me, verb stay. Or verb watched, person him, verb walk. So you always have that pattern of verb, person, verb. And in this pattern, this is where we have bare infinitives. That's kind of why these three are this way, because you make somebody do something, you let somebody do something, you hear something happen, you see something happen, you watch something happen. We'll always have that bare infinitive when we have this structure of verb, person, verb. That's really the pattern here. Or you can always just memorize too. These are very special. There are only a small number, so you can just memorize the structure, make, let, hear, see, watch, and that way you'll always know to use the bare infinitive. All right. So let's talk about gerunds then. So what are gerunds? Well, this is actually a verb that is changed into a noun. So it's a little different from an infinitive, because an infinitive was a verb kind of used in a noun context, such as an object, whereas a gerund is actually taking that verb, you change the form, and then you use it as a noun. So what is the form? Well, the form is always verb ing. But be very careful, this is different from the present continuous. So this is not something like am walking, have been walking, was walking. This is not the present continuous or any continuous. This is totally different with the verb alone with an ing suffix. So what does that look like? Well, you can say running is my favorite exercise. So here I have the idea that the activity of running is my favorite. So I can use the gerund running. Or we enjoy baking on the weekend. So baking here, I enjoy what? Well, I enjoy the action, so I can use the gerund, baking. Or thank you for helping me study. Thank you for what? Well, help or that action, so helping. You can use the gerund. So in all of these examples, that's what the gerund is. You want to talk about the action as a noun. So we're using a gerund in those contexts where you can say what or why, or the gerund will always try to answer those noun questions. Okay, so how do I use it? Well, the usage is very similar to an infinitive, but there are some clear differences. One, you can use a gerund as a subject. So before, uh, just to be clear, you can use an infinitive as a subject. It is possible, but it's a very special thing. Using an infinitive as a subject is something in poetry, in literature like Shakespeare. It's kind of an older thing, and it's a special thing. Normally, we only use gerunds for the subject of the sentence. Also, similar to infinitives, gerunds can be used as the object of a sentence. This is one where they are completely different. We only use gerunds after prepositions. Always, 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 it's a gerund after a preposition. And then again, the same rule after some verbs. Unfortunately, this is again more memorization. Some verbs prefer gerunds to follow, so we just have to learn that you just have to memorize the verbs that do this. So some examples. Running is my favorite exercise. Well, here we're using it as the subject. So running, the activity, is my favorite exercise. So I want to talk about this activity as the subject, so I use a gerund. Or I can use it as the object here. They practice what? Well, they practice painting every day. So now I want to talk about that activity. Painting is the object, so I use a gerund. Or after a preposition. So I drink coffee before going to work every day, every day. And so I have the preposition before. After, we'll use the gerund, before going to work. And then finally, here is just an example of some verbs that prefer gerunds. So you admit doing something, you dislike doing, you enjoy doing, you recommend doing, you suggest doing, etc. It's always going to be those verbs. And like I said, there are many, many, many. There's etc., etc., etc. So it's just more to memorize. I will say most verbs prefer the infinitive. That's kind of the biggest group. But there are a big group that also prefer the gerund, so it's just, I recommend searching for some lists and just beginning that process of memorization. All right. So these are kind of the four categories as well for gerunds, and that's really it. Subjects, objects, and after prepositions. However, we do need to talk a bit about comparing them, because for some verbs, you can use both. So some verbs will take both the gerund and the infinitive, and it actually will change the meaning of the sentence, which one you use. Because remember, one is actually a noun, and one is just behaving like a noun. It's still a verb. So verbs like try, remember, stop, forget, regret, these verbs all change meaning depending on if you are talking about a gerund or an infinitive. So, for example, I tried taking medicine for my cold. So here we have a gerund. In this sentence, I'm talking about trying something new, trying a new experience, because I actually have the noun. So, you're talking now about that noun, that thing. I tried this. I tried taking medicine for my cold. It didn't work. Or I can use the gerund, or the infinitive rather. I tried to study, but there was too much noise. So now I'm talking about another action. I tried to do an action, not I tried a thing, taking. I tried to do. And so we can see that there's a slight difference where this is about trying a new experience, whereas this one is about trying action and then another action. So, you have to be careful that you are thinking about the gerund or the infinitive in the correct way as a noun or an action. But let's look at something more close together. So I stopped to eat, I stopped eating. Here they're exactly the same, only gerund and infinitive are different. So what's the difference? So I stopped to eat. So this is I stopped to do something. I stopped to do another action. So we have kind of step one, step two. So I'm walking down the street. I stop. Oh, a cafe. So I stopped to eat at the cafe. However, this one now we have a gerund, so we have a noun. So I stopped eating. So this is now a difference in meaning where I'm standing or I'm sitting at a restaurant. I am in the process of eating this action. And then I stopped the action. I stopped eating. So I still have my food, my fork. I stopped eating. So one is about number three here. The infinitive is about that action. Step one, step two. I stopped to do something else. Whereas this one is about the process here. You've stopped the process of eating. So these, all of these are different as well. Like I remembered to do something versus I remembered doing, or I forget to do something versus I forget doing something. There's a very small group of verbs that take both the infinitive and the gerund. So really, I recommend looking at these verbs specifically to begin to learn the difference of the gerund or the infinitive for each one. Okay. So on the other hand, though, some, matter. Some can only take one. Some can only take the other. Some can take both. Well, some can take both, and then it makes no difference. Some are totally the same. So verbs like start, begin, continue, enjoy, love. You can use both the gerund or the infinitive, and there's no difference in meaning at all. So she loves to run. She loves running. I started reading a new book. I started to read a new book. They're both totally the same in all of the examples. So some you don't have to worry about. So there are really four categories of verbs to talk about here. You have verbs for gerunds, verbs for infinitives, verbs for both, where it changes the meaning, and then verbs where it doesn't matter. So unfortunately, it's just a lot of memorization for these, for gerunds and infinitives. You have those specific rules, like after prepositions, use a gerund. After adjectives, use an infinitive. But beyond that, it's just lots of memorization. Okay. Oh, sorry. Maybe the fire alarm startled. So let's look at some practice. Hopefully there won't be any more noises. It gave me a bit of a shock there, but we're okay. We can continue. So number one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you two choices for this infinitive or a bear in. What you need to do, find which is correct for the sentence. All right. So let's try. Number one, apply for a job can take a long time, or applying for a job can take a long time. Which do you think is correct? The gerund, applying, or the bare infinitive, apply? All right, have a moment to think. Try to remember your rules. Is it a subject? Is it an object? Is it after a preposition? All right, let's look at number two. It's important spending, or it's important to spend time with your family. Which do you think is correct? The gerund, spending, or the infinitive, to spend? All right. Let's look at the next one. Phil is very good at solving or to solve problems. Phil is very good at solving problems, or Phil is very good at to solve problems. So we've got a preposition here. What's the rule after preposition? Gerund or infinitive? Okay. Number four. My mother makes me to clean, or my mother makes me clean. my room every weekend. So, which do you think? My mother makes me to clean or clean? Infinitive or bare infinitive? We have to remember, what is that special rule for makes or let? Okay, next. Ask the waiter to bring, or ask the waiter, bring more napkins, please. Okay, what do we do here? Infinitive or bare infinitive? Okay, so another example. They started going to the gym together, or they started to go to the gym together. What do we think? Gerund or infinitive? So, yeah, now we have to think always what happens before. All right, final example. Be careful not to ask, or be careful not asking about her mother. They don't speak at the moment. Ooh, drama. Um, but yeah, so for all of these, think what is happening before the gerund or the infinitive. And that's kind of the biggest clue which one is correct. And then if there's nothing before, well, what is your rule for a subject? All right. Have a moment to think. I think the sound is finished. I apologize if you could hear the alarm, um, the fire alarm activated for a moment. That's why I was jumping. It scared me, but I think it's finished. Okay. Well, let's check these answers. You've had some time to think. So starting with number one. Well, in number one, we have the option of a gerund and a bare infinitive. Well, it's the subject of the sentence because there's nothing, nothing more. So we know it's the subject, so it's the gerund because gerunds are the subject of the sentence. Next, let's look here. It's important spending or to spend. Well, we need to look at what's before. So we have important. Important is an adjective, and so after the adjective, it's the infinitive. Next, Phil is very good at solving or to solve. Well, here we have a preposition at, and always after the preposition we use the gerund. Always good at solving, good for solving. All prepositions, gerunds. All right. So, my mother makes me to clean or clean. Well, here make is that special word. We remember it was the exception. So we use the bare infinitive, makes me clean. Always those exception verbs like make or let, hear, watch, see, we'll use the bare infinitive. All right, next, ask the waiter to bring or bring more napkins. Well, here we have the waiter before. Well, that's not very helpful. Nothing about nouns, so we have to look at the verb ask. Well, after ask, we always use the infinitive. Just a rule, you always ask somebody to do something. All right, next, they started going or they started to go. Well, if you remember, start is a verb where no difference, so you can use both. They started going, they started to go, no difference, and that's because of start. It doesn't care. And then finally, be careful. And now we've got negatives too, not to ask or not asking. Well, let's look before. Careful, this is an adjective, so we know we need the infinitive. And remember that both gerunds and infinitives can be negative, and to do that, all you do is add not, and that's all you do. So you can say not applying, or it's important not to spend, good at not solving. You can always add not, and it will make the negative very, very, very directly. All right. But so those are my 7 examples for gerunds and infinitives. I hope these help clear up some confusions because now, as I said, we're going to talk about work vocabulary. So these are just some common words that I see in job advertisements. So I just wanted to talk about them quickly so that you could have some context for them. So I'm going to focus on working types and descriptions. So I have words like full-time, part-time, self-employed, unemployed, freelance, temporary position, to be in charge, and responsible for. So the definitions. Full-time is a job that's usually 35 to 40 hours per week. There's Depending on country and culture, that number will be very different. But usually the idea is with one full-time job, you can support your life. You only need one full-time job. On the other hand, a part-time job is a position that is not sufficient. It's not enough for your life, so you need maybe one, maybe two or three part-time jobs to make enough money. So it's just anything less than full-time is part-time. Even 1 hour less is still kind of considered part-time. Another situation is self-employed. This means you are your boss. You do not work for another company. You do not work for another organization. It is all you. Maybe you own a store, or you own a business, or you do work some other way. That's called being self-employed. Or you can just not work, and that's unemployed. Usually unemployed means I want to work, but I can't. I'm looking for a job, or for some reason I cannot work. If you're older and you choose not to work, that's called retirement. It's slightly different. Next, freelance. So freelance is someone who does not work for one company. It's very similar to self-employed, except that freelance usually means I do work for another company, but maybe it's only for one project or one contract, or one short thing. So I work for them, I work for them, I work for them. They say I need help for this short project. We do the project and then we're done. And then I work for someone else. And then I do another project here and another project there. That's freelance, where you're working around for different people. Next, a temporary position. A temporary position is just a job created for a short time. 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. The plan for that job is that it will be for a short time. And so you might see the word temporary position. Next is the phrase to be in charge. This is to describe being in control of something about the job. So you would say your boss is in charge of the company. They have control. Or, I'm in charge of recording purchases, or I'm in charge of counting money. It just means whatever you have control over, and that you make decisions for. However, on the other hand, we have to be responsible for, and this is just the duties of the job. So the difference is that when you're in charge, you have control. You say how and what happens. Responsible for means it's just you need to do this, and this is part of the job. So if you are, a secretary, you are responsible for talking to people. You are responsible for recording information and writing documents. But normally you're not in charge. These are just what you must do every day. So that's kind of a difference. To be in charge is to have control, whereas responsible for just means I must do this, every day for my job. But there we go. Those are just 8 common words I see in English job advertisements. So I thought I would talk about them so that if you see any of these words, now you have some context of how they are used and why we use them. But that is everything for this lesson. So I'm just going to quickly talk about everything again as a summary, a review for everything, because we talked a lot about these gerunds and infinitives in a lot of different situations. So we talked about infinitives, and we talked about the exception, bare infinitives. So those are infinitives without to. And we talked about when to use them both. So we had, rules for infinitives, objects, after adjectives, and we had uses for bare infinitives, such as with make, or let, or hear, or see, and also about how certain verbs how certain verbs just require infinitive. We also talked about gerunds, and we talked about when to use them. So after prepositions, as subjects, as objects, and then again after certain verbs. So we can see we had all of those different situations for each of those. And then we compared gerunds to infinitives, and so this is verbs where they change meaning. So verbs like try or remember will change for gerund or change for infinitive. And for verbs that don't change, like start, there's no difference between a gerund or an infinitive for those. And then we talked about working vocabulary. Working vocabulary about different types of jobs and how to talk about them. So yes, that's everything for this lesson. I realize it was a lot of information, so I really recommend downloading my PowerPoint and downloading my notes for this lesson. That way you can have all of my rules and all of my examples for your notes. I wish I could give more help. I wish I could say more than memorize, but unfortunately that's my biggest piece of advice is if you really want to master gerunds or infinitives, it's a lot of memorization. Um, so, thank you all so much for coming to watch my lesson today. I hope I helped you understand gerunds or infinitives a little bit more. Sorry again if you could hear the fire alarm during the practice. I apologize for the noise, but fortunately it was only a few times. So I hope you have a good afternoon, and once again, thank you for watching my lesson. I hope to see you again. Bye-bye.